we're really aiming to build something that, first of all, is really easy to use, and second of all, also has automations built in to take care of administrative tasks that are currently a large burden in existing EHRs. Because that's a really huge piece of software, what we've started with is a tool called the Smart Patient Intake form, and that can help doctors save 10 minutes per patient visit by automatically drafting an HPI or subjective section before the appointment based on a patient questionnaire.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the channel, or welcome to the channel if you're new here. I have a very courageous guest today, and I say that because of her transition from medicine into a startup that she has created that's going to help improve physician well-being and help make their charting efficiency so much faster. So I want to welcome to the channel Dr. Rachel Draelos, who has both her medical degree and a Ph.D. in computer science. She is the CEO and founder of Cydoc. And I do want to preface that I am not affiliated with Cydoc, so this is going to be an unbiased discussion about what Cydoc is and who it can help. But before we dive in, Rachel, thank you so much for coming to the channel.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
And I am excited to have you. And for people who have not yet had the pleasure of meeting you, can you please introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Hi, I'm Rachel Draelos. As mentioned, I have a background both in medicine and computer science. I actually initially started the MD Ph.D. program thinking I was going to focus entirely on genetics, and then through a series of meeting different people and exploring different areas, ended up getting really interested in AI and completed a Ph.D. in computer science focused on AI. That got me really excited about the intersection of healthcare and AI and building out different AI applications that could help both clinicians and patients. So yeah, I'm excited to be here today and talk more about it.
And you described Cydoc better than I was going to. So I'm going to give you the honor of telling us a little bit more about what Cydoc is.
Sure. So Cydoc is my startup that I founded a little bit over 5 years ago now, which is crazy to think that time has flown by that quickly. Our overall mission is to build the first AI native electronic health record. I put that in quotes because it's a term that we coined, but it's meant to capture that we're really aiming to build something that first of all, is really easy to use, and second of all, also has automations built in to take care of administrative tasks that are currently a large burden in existing EHRs. Because that's a really huge piece of software, what we've started with is a tool called the Smart Patient Intake form, and that can help doctors save 10 minutes per patient visit by automatically drafting an HPI or subjective section before the appointment based on a patient questionnaire.
And when you were considering this, can you tell us kind of the evolution of how did this come to your mind?
Absolutely. So I started out in the MD PhD program with actually never having used an electronic medical record before, which I think is pretty normal. I mean, I know there were some of my med school classmates who had immense amounts of shadowing experience, and maybe they'd been allowed to use an EMR before, but I had never used one before. And Duke's program is kind of interesting because you do 1 year of lecture and then you jump right into a clinical year after that. So I'd had my first year of clinical rotations and I'd seen the EMR, and my first reaction was, honestly, I was very shocked. I really assumed that the kind of central technology of medicine would be much better. I remember sitting for, probably 2 hours just clicking through generic lab test result headers, trying to find this one very specific genetic test that had been done on this patient who'd had a ton of different specialty tests done. And it was like every time, click, wait several seconds, the PDF loads, scroll through the PDF, it's the wrong one, go back, do it again. I was thinking, this is absolutely insane. Like all of this is like unstructured data as PDFs and it loads really slowly, and like, this is crazy. Or like the records not being shareable. Like I remember this huge box of all these printed records for this patient who had been to like 20 different hospitals. And as the medical student, I mean, I was the only one who had time to look at that, of course. So they were like, oh, like, see what's in here, what's going on with this patient. I was thinking to myself, this is crazy that the software is like this. So that was what first got me really interested in specifically electronic medical records. And then when I was starting out my PhD and got interested in AI, I ended up working on a bunch of research projects to build AI solutions for specific medical applications. And from that, I got an inside look at the data underneath the EHR, which was another mind-boggling experience because the data is super messy. And most people on the clinical side never really get to see what the data looks like because there's not really a reason that a clinician would need to be looking at oodles of raw data unless you're doing clinical research. But the data is really a lot messier than I ever imagined. And the amount of, just for, I guess, one concrete example, one of the projects I worked on was predicting abnormalities from CT scans. I probably spent 6 months downloading and cleaning the image data. And then I spent another year downloading and cleaning and structuring the radiology report data. Because like ultimately what I want to do is train a model on here's an image, predict what abnormalities are present. And just getting the like, yes or no, is there a mass? Yes or no, is there cardiomegaly? All of those labels, like that in itself took a year. So from those two experiences, I thought, well, we really need a new EHR because doctors deserve something better and patients deserve something better. And we have all this untapped potential for leveraging modern technology that it's just not happening in what's currently out there.
You captured so many things that come up to me as both a research fellow in a lab that's very heavy in AI and imaging. So my boss has, he does a lot of radiomics. And so we do a lot of work on CT and they do a lot of prediction modeling. And I'm the one that does the manual chart review and data extraction. And I'm currently extracting the radiology reports, the clinical reports, all looking for a diagnosis of osteoradionecrosis. So I work in radiation oncology. And that's what we're noticing is I have to do it manually because the data would be so, as you were saying, messy or dirty. And the dirty data in would provide dirty data out. Like you can't do any modeling off of that. So the time consuming nature of getting the established AI to work with the EHR, it seems so mind-boggling to me how you'd even approach that with what we've currently got with the EHRs, but how extremely important it is because of what you just showcased.
Yeah, it makes me want to like pull up my natural language processing framework that I spent all this time just going over and refining and changing things. So because the data is just chaotic, and maybe after we chat, I can send you a link in case it's relevant to what you're doing. But yeah, I put together this thing called SARL, and that was an abbreviation, but it would like go through the reports and look for what like all these negation words to try and figure out what things are negated versus not negated. And then I would have all these different synonyms for like all the different medical findings, and it would look for those. And yeah, it gets crazy trying to structure data after the fact. And I think that's one of the key things that we want to fix, which is that a lot of times it's way easier to collect the structured data in the beginning and just store it clean than it is to go back after the fact and try to clean it up when it's already messy. So that's one of the core principles of what we're building now, is that our goal is to make sure that when the data goes in, it's already as organized as it can be. And the way that we're setting up everything from the user interface to the databases has in mind that we want to be able to actually do analytics on the data and not just kind of throw a filing cabinet into a computer and call it good.
That's awesome. And yeah, and I know that charting is a big pain point for so many people. And some things that you shared with me about this platform. So one, just to give clarity to people, currently it works with their EHR. Can you kind of talk about that?
Sure. So we had this decision point as we were building out the first version of our node generator, which is we could make it kind of a plugin for large EHRs that support plugins, which would basically be like Epic and Athena and companies that have sort of a app store, or we could make it as a tool that anyone could access regardless of their current EMR. And we went with the latter option, mostly because for our initial launch, we wanted to make sure that anybody would have the opportunity to use it. And right now there's a situation where sometimes there's barriers to people even having access to AI tools, because if they're not using a platform that offers them, then there's no real hope for being able to experience the benefit. So what we have is, it's essentially a web portal, and the patient can access it through a QR code or a link. So if you have a brick and mortar practice, there's basically just a little poster that has a QR code on it. They can sit in the front desk, they come in, they say, hi, I'm checking in, and then they just scan it with their phone. Or if there's, tablets around, they could have a tablet that scans it, and then they can fill the whole thing out there. We've made sure that the interface is as simple as possible so that it works on really any screen size. And after the patient goes through, then it gets submitted and the note gets generated, and that note can be viewed from our portal, which, I mean, I'm happy to try a screen share if you want me to try
Yeah,
one.
let's do it. Let's see what
Okay.
happens here.
Perfect. So this is this is an interface where the generated notes will appear, and there's none loaded in there currently because I haven't generated one yet. But I can show you what the workflow looks like. So we have these different posters that will automatically generate that have a practice-specific QR code that the patient can scan when they arrive in the office. We also have this link where if the patient is at home and let's say there's already some automated reminder system set up, this could just be included there and they could fill it out from home, or this could be sent to them in any variety of ways. So I'll just click on this for now, and it should load here. So then this is what the patient would see on their side, and I'll just go through and pretend I'm a patient, populate it with some fake data here. And that's just so we know who they are. And then we'll say that the date of the appointment is today. And I'll just put in some big data there too. So then this is where we get into the kind of meat and potatoes. We have a way for patients to indicate their main reasons for coming in. And this is because of the whole idea is to try and make this almost like an extension of the doctor, where it can automatically take part of the history so that not only is the generated note clinically relevant, and that saves time in the history taking, but also saves time on the typing side, since you don't have to write down some of the things that they've already put in. And this is also customizable based on the type of practice. So right now this is showing a kind of one of the family medicine types of views, but we have the ability to change what gets pinned here based on what specialty it is. And if the patient doesn't see their visit reason up here in the pinned list, they can also type here. So I'll just put in some more things here. They could, add a whole bunch more, but because we don't want them to put in way too much stuff, we have them prioritize and pick the top 3. So I'll just pick, let's say, these 3 things here. So then we get into the clinical questions, and these are all targeted towards the chief complaint. So the patient can go through and answer all of these, and you can see for this diabetes example, it's asking about home blood sugar monitoring. If the patient says no, then there's not follow-ups, and if they say yes, then there are follow-ups. And that's one of the other key features, is that we have this sort of interactive aspect where, depending on what they put in, we'll ask different kinds of follow-up questions. So the patient can go through here and put in some answers to these questions, asking about some hyperglycemia symptoms, and then if they've had foot exam, eye exam, dental exam. Cool. So that's the diabetes questionnaire. And then we'll get into this questionnaire for upper respiratory infection symptoms, asking what symptoms exactly do they have. We have a way of kind of translating between like patient speak and doctor speak. So we'll use like runny nose on the patient side, and then the generated note will use rhinorrhea, for example. I will just
very cool.
More fake info here. So yeah, you get the idea of like filling out all these different questions, and then I'll just skip over the rest of this last questionnaire and submit it. So the patient goes through, submits it, usually takes them around 5 minutes. And then on the clinic side, let me just go back to today. Here it is. So this could be either an MA or someone involved in check-in who could access this note and copy it into the EMR, or in some cases, the physician themselves is okay with just logging in and getting the note from here. But in any case, this copy note button, this is our current EMR integration. So this enables just pasting into any existing EMR, and it has all of the information that the patient put in formatted as a note rather than a Q&A.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I know this was one of our big things when I was in residency, and you'd have the notes started. Just even having that note started gives you that peace of mind. It's kind of like the law of inertia. Once you get going, and you at least have some things down, because I know when it's busy, some people don't get to their notes until maybe the end of the day, and they've just trying to write down key points to make sure that they have right. And here you've got some really great details that are very pertinent to this appointment.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm very excited about how it's been going so far. It seems to be saving around 10 minutes per visit, which adds up to a lot of time, even over just one day. And we've also have maintained this option of customizability, and so that way we can add, if we have around 150 different chief complaints now, but we can always add more. So if someone is, a world expert in some, obscure condition, and then they're like a sub specialist, this could still be useful because we can put in all of the custom kinds of questions that they want to ask for their patients beforehand.
Awesome. Can you describe a little bit more on the customizations?
So there's basically two ways that it can be used. There's one way, which is if people don't want to customize and they say, hey, you have this library of 150 chief complaints already that pretty much encompasses my practice. So those topics are generally the ones we've already built out: family medicine, OBGYN, endocrinology, and then sprinklings of other specialties as well. So that's what we have already. For people who do want the customizations, there's basically, the way we do it is first we figure out what are the chief complaints that you want your patients to have front and center. What are the main reasons people are coming to see you? And so they're kind of our guiding lights. And then for each of those, we just have a conversation or go back and forth over email, or sometimes people will send me documents. It's really whatever is easiest to convey. These are the questions I want to ask. And for certain questions, maybe I want these kind of follow-up questions depending on how they answered something earlier. So people will provide me with that information, and then we have a special way of formatting all of it so that it can be read into our database. And then we have some algorithms that we've built out that will be able to pull everything into our user interface and automatically generate the right display so that all of those custom questions will get shown to the patient. So it's meant to be as straightforward as possible. Basically, as long as a practice can convey to me the content that they want, I can upload it so that it shows up for their patients.
That's so awesome. And where can they learn more about it?
So there's a couple of ways. One way is you're welcome to talk with me directly if that's the most, if that's easiest for you, if you enjoy that. I always really enjoy answering questions that people have about what we built and figuring out how it can help them. So there is a link on our website, www.cydoc.ai. All of the book a demo links will basically send you to a way to book a demo with me. So that's one option. Or if you rather poke around on the web, then there's a frequently asked questions page also on our website that has a bunch more information as well.
That's great. And you were saying the evolution. Let's hear a little bit more about your vision for Cydoc.
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, ultimately, I'm really excited about building a fully fledged electronic medical record. And so to get there, we're doing a couple different things. One of them is that the way we've built out our current smartphone product is such that we can use that as kind of a like foundational piece of software to build on top of to make the EMR. We actually have, from an earlier iteration of the product, a bunch of interfaces built out for like medications and past medical history and family history and all this stuff that, through talking to customers, those ended up not making it into the version that we launched, but they're definitely useful for the EMR. So that's our foundation. And then we've applied for an SBIR grant, which is this really cool program where the government has tons of money that they will give small businesses to do research. So we've applied for one of those just this past earlier this month, and that would be really great for adding on some of the additional features that we would need for this to be fully an electronic medical record. And one thing that basically our main guiding principles are: one, it has to have a good user interface, so something intuitive, simple, very clear how to use it. You don't have to do like multiple days of training or anything, because it's simple. So that's one. And then the other is that the data is really clean. So that changes aspects of the user interface, but also how we structure our databases. And then finally, this concept of being able to integrate AI in order to automate administrative tasks. So those are our main principles, and the ultimate goal would be EHR where really easy to use, saves a ton of time, and can fully leverage the technology that's basically like already out there and just kind of waiting to be actually used.
It's so important too with you coming in with your medical background to create these interfaces. And I think that's one of the big problems with most EHR programs that we know is they're not created by people that use them.
Definitely. When I was preparing the SBIR application, I got really into the kind of the weeds of all this research and kind of history of EHRs. And I'd always heard things like, oh yeah, I know they're mostly for administrative purposes, but I didn't realize that for actually most EHRs, they first were just for administrators, and then they tacked on all the clinical stuff later. And apparently a lot of EHR companies don't ever have any clinical people provide them feedback on their interfaces at all. They just assign some random engineers to build them out and never get any feedback from clinicians, and then they just launch the product, which is basically the opposite of what I want to do, because I think you need to have the people who are ultimately using it have continuous input into the interface, because that's the only way you could know what's going to work for people.
Yeah, I just did a certificate in informatics, and that's what I was just blown away, like all the quality improvement. I'm like, okay, first of all, we need to have the end users involved in this process every step of the way, and saying, is this feasible? Is this clinically applicable? Is this relevant? And what's the cost? As you were saying, going through all the PDFs of one single, looking for one single test, and all the risks of how many things are just so deep within the EHR and lead to fatigue. And then there's all the pop-ups. I did some studies on just like the alert fatigue, and like we just ignore it all because like it comes up all the time and it's so cumbersome.
Yeah, definitely. I saw some really interesting studies where they were actually showing like mortality effects related to the EHR records and like the lack of transferability, and basically when the patient records like weren't able to be transmitted properly because there's no interoperability, they could like quantify the mortality effects. It's like, so people are literally dying because of this bad software.
Yep.
And it's really
Mhm.
it's really a huge opportunity.
Yeah, there was a lot of cases that we talked about where there were some EHRs that like the patient actually had to be admitted before they can make the orders active. And for like little kids coming into the emergency room, the delay in care was increasing mortality rates. So
Yeah,
there's a lot of studies on how EHR
scary.
contributed to mortality and morbidity. And then of course to reduce physician well-being. A lot of people saying, screw this. So many times I hear, I just cannot put up with the administrative burden anymore. And a lot of it has to do with the EHR. So I am very excited for what you're creating. And I also just want to, a lot of people when they're medical students or they're physicians who have just think about the traditional path. Can you just please share a little bit more about, your decision going from medical school, doing your PhD, and then jumping into your startup?
Absolutely. So it was a difficult decision because I've always been a person who has lots of interests. And I think I basically had to come to a point where I accepted my sort of human limits, if that makes sense. So when I started out the program, I was thinking, oh, I get so excited about everything, and I'm going to do everything, and I'll do all the things all the time, and it worked for a while. But really towards the end of my PhD, I started really seriously thinking, okay, I'm gonna have to choose soon because I'm gonna finish my PhD, and then I'm gonna have 1 year of medical school left, and then I'm gonna have to decide like what am I doing afterwards. And I had a set of reasons why I really wanted to do residency. I was thinking internal medicine. I really loved internal medicine. And so I had this big list of like all these reasons why I should do an internal medicine residency. And then I had my startup that at that point I'd been working on for a couple years. I did bootstrap it for the first few years, so that's an interesting. There's multiple different ways to do a startup, and there's this kind of this spectrum from like bootstrapping it and growing slowly over time and trying to like maintain control, build like a really good product over a long period of time. And then there's the other side where it's like get a ton of VC funding, grow crazy fast, exit in 5 years, and like who even knows what happened because it was like a rocket.
Mhm.
So on the spectrum, I'm like more on the more closely on the bootstrap side. But because of that, like I had already invested not only a lot of time, but also a lot of money. And like fundamentally, I was super excited about the idea. And I basically had to come to a point where I was like, well, I can't have a startup and be a resident because that's just not going to happen. Like maybe if there were 2 copies of me or
Yeah.
like 4 copies of
Yeah.
me,
Yep.
then that would work. But you know, residency is like way more than a full-time job, and startup can be way more than a full-time job because you can kind of just let it take up as much time as you want. It can just sort of consume everything. So I did a lot of thinking, and I think there were several factors that ultimately led me to pick the startup. So one of them was that I guess just I felt like for myself personally, based on just my own interests and my own training, I felt like maybe I could have more of the kind of impact I wanted to have long term if I just went all in with the startup and just really tried to make it happen. So that was one factor. And then another factor was that I realized that while there are a lot of things I really love about clinical medicine, I really couldn't let go of things emotionally. Like when bad things would happen to patients, I just couldn't let go of it. And I've heard some like, you know, very senior attendings say like, oh, well, like you get used to it and you know, you can like let it go and stuff like that. And I'm like, okay, well, that's, you know, they're obviously very experienced and like maybe that is what would happen to me. But the only point of reference I had was just how I currently was. And the way I currently was, I like wasn't really able to let go of like really tragic things that happen to patients. So I was like, well, that's going to be like, I know it's going to be really tough for me to deal with. And so I think, yeah, it just came down to, I don't recommend this. I applied for residency. There's just like, you have all this momentum. I applied for residency and then I interviewed and I uploaded a match list. And then like 2 days before it was the like cutoff for the match list, I was like, wait, like I can't do this. Like I have to like try to make my company work. Like I have to try to fix the EHR because the EHR is super broken and it's like it's hurting doctors, it's hurting patients, it's holding medicine back. Like people are using software from like 60 years ago. And okay, sure, it's like a long shot. There's these multi-billion-dollar companies out there that are selling the current EHR products, but like I really have to try. So I actually withdrew my match list like a few days before it was due. And like that was it. And then I was just like, okay, I'm just gonna go for this. And I remember talking to someone who said something like, well, a lot of times you have these huge inflection points in life where you're like some big decision about like personal life or career or something where you know like one way or the other it's gonna like really change the course of things. And a lot of times, I mean, not always, but like a lot of times people look back on that and they're like, yeah, you know, it kind of worked out. And it's partly because you sort of like become the person that you like chose.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
I feel like I feel like that's happening for me where like I'm excited with where things are going. And you know, I'm sure if there were a sampling of like 100 universes, there's probably some subset of those where like I did do residency and became a practicing physician. Then there's probably some other subset where I like became a professor and you know, who knows? There's just a lot of cool things to do. But at least in this universe, I'm enjoying the startup world.
That is such a great picture of all of it could have worked out, and this is the path you chose, and this is what the path you're going to make work out. So it's like all of those things could have been true. Like, could have been a great physician, you could have been a great professor, you are a great CEO and founder of Cydoc, and the passion and commitment and the courage. Because I think sometimes in order to gather all the information that we need, we have to take it as far as you sounds like you did in order to feel that and be like, you know what, this is not what I want to do. Because I started in oral surgery and I couldn't figure out what was going on internally. And I was in my 3rd year of residency and I was like, okay, this isn't I want to do psychiatry. And I was like, this is clearly not the path. And I wish I would have chosen earlier because of the logistics of it all, but I wasn't ready. And I still am applying to match for psychiatry next year. And like, oh yeah, I could have done that so many years ago because I knew that's what I wanted to do years ago. But now is the right time. And for you to make this commitment now and to have that passion and for you to have that like whole body, oh my gosh, the EHR is so screwed up. Can you imagine being in internal medicine and working on this EHR that's so screwed up and just thinking, I wish I could be working on my startup to fix this stupid thing?
I actually had that exact mental image. I had the exact mental image. I was like, if I go through with this, I know I'm literally going to be like tearing my hair out over like having to use this thing that I'm like not trying to fix. So yeah, it's definitely it's interesting to like I ended up like also looking at it kind of as like a self-compassion thing. My sister got like really into self-compassion, and she sent me all these really great resources on it. And like around the like that span of a few days where like I ended up withdrawing my match list, I like had this thought where I was like, you know, maybe it's actually a question of self-compassion to just like let myself do this thing I'm really excited about. Because I feel like medicine tends to attract a lot of people who are like, you just gotta do the thing, and you gotta like it attracts a lot of like really gritty people. And so you have this like all this momentum, and you're like, well, I'm tough enough, I can do the thing, and like I should be able to do all the things. And I had this moment where I was like, well, maybe I should just be nice to myself. And like if I was somebody else and I was going to give myself advice as somebody else, I would be like, well, why don't you just do the thing you're super excited about, and like just go for it.
I love how much in alignment that is. So on the channel recently, Dr. Dina George, she's a hospitalist, and I did a book review on Fierce Self-Compassion by Kristen Neff. And that's what because we all talk about, like, there's such a deficiency. If I could prescribe self-compassion, I prescribe it to everybody, especially in medicine. And I went into surgery thinking that in order to have a sense of self-worth, I needed to do the hardest thing possible to prove like that I could think of for me. What would have been the hardest thing for me, which can be easy for some people, but I, like you, it really resonated when you said that you know, you take everything that happens to the patient, because I'm like a very strong empathic, highly sensitive person, which society told me was a weakness. So I'm like, well, if I have this surgeon ego, obviously no one will realize I'm super sensitive. Then I just became a super sensitive surgical resident, and I would walk past the ICUs and just palpate the emotions that were going on, the fear from the families. I'm like, oh my gosh, like I to not be able to process that. So your thing is Cydoc fixing the EHR, and my thing is like having an emotional processing outlet for physician wellness, because all these things we were turning it inward, and then people are struggling in silence because we're afraid that if we admit we're humans, that there's going to be some repercussions about that.
Yeah, I think that what you're doing is so important, because there's so many people in medicine where it's like they have to like absorb all this pain all the time, and then they have their own pain, but then there's no way to like acknowledge it and like kind of realize that like it's okay to take care of yourself. So I really applaud what you're doing. I think it's awesome.
Yeah, mutual. It's definitely it's interesting because the missions are like the same, right? You're improving physician well-being and efficiency through the EHR. And it's we all have to go through it at different angles, because in the physician wellness sector, like wellness is becoming a trigger word because we're given these modules and yoga to do, and not things that optimize practice flow, which is like the true need in improving physician wellness, like what you're doing.
Yeah, and I also think that there's this weird like business culture. I mean, there's like aspects of business that are good, and there's aspects of business that it's just weird when they're put into medicine. Like this whole idea of like, okay, well, there's these physicians, and we'll just keep throwing stuff at them because like we're not going to assign any value to their time. So it's just like watching my husband, who's currently a resident, trying to get a hold of patients on the phone, and I'm like thinking to myself, from interacting with people from like all these different companies, just as part of like meeting people related to like startup land, like the fact that he has to like you know, he's this like highly educated professional, and he has to call and like wait for it to ring, and then connect to the translator, and then go through like his name and all this blah blah blah, and then like describe what are you going to do if it goes to voicemail, and then like wait for like the to like ring some more, and then it's just like this is insane, and then repeating that over and over again. It's like, why can't we just have a system set up where like, I mean, you got to have the follow up for the results, so like maybe there's this concept of like the patient, there's like some block of time for like talking to patients about their results, and the patient can just pick a little time slot, and the patient can call you and just like get around this whole craziness of spending hours and hours on the phone. It's like the whole system is this like weird backwards thing where it's like, oh yeah, we can just throw things at doctors forever because they're like these sponges for like all this random stuff that like needs to be organized better.
Yeah, I feel you. I feel you. We get exploited in the system. And to give patients autonomy. Not only is that going to help the efficiency of the practice and take the burden off of the physicians, but it's going to give back the responsibility to the patient who are, to take ownership of their own health is empowering them.
Definitely.
And
Yeah. And I think that like making it, like making medical information and like scheduling, and all of that stuff like easier for patients and easier for doctors is only gonna be beneficial because, saving time for the doctors, saving time for the patients, it just makes the whole process less stressful.
I love it. I love this vision. It's a great vision. And going in now,
I'm
we just
excited.
yes, me too. And we just started a new year. Do you have a word for the year? What are you looking forward to this year?
Oh, a word for the year. Oh, I should have a word for the year. I love words. I actually love to write. So like my two big passions are like fixing the EHR and writing. Man, I should have a word. I'm gonna have to think about that one because I know if I pick a word, I'm gonna think about it later. I should have picked another word. But I guess in terms of like goals for the year, I really like to get the grant funding to continue building out all the different pieces of our EHR so that hopefully within a year of that, we'll be able to have our first like prototype EHR out. Yeah, I'm really excited to get to share the Smart Patient Intake Forum with more practices and help more doctors save time with that. And I think I'm also really excited about meeting more people. One thing I really enjoyed about last year was that I got to meet a lot of really awesome people doing really awesome things. So that's something else I'm hoping to continue this year.
Fantastic. And one more time, how can people connect with you?
Yes, so a couple ways. So one way is through like a direct meeting link through the book a demo link on the Cydoc website, www.cydoc.ai. That will set up a meeting with me. You're also welcome to send me an email. So my email is my first name, Rachel, Rachel, dot my last name, Draelos, Draelos, at cydoc.ai, cydoc.ai. So you're welcome to send me an email anytime. Anyone who would like to talk to me about EHR feature wish lists or just rant about whatever you don't like about your EHR, I always enjoy having these conversations. Or if you're really curious about AI, so that's like a whole other can of worms. So yeah, I'm also happy to talk to anybody about AI. So feel free to reach out.
And Cydoc has a blog. You said you like writing, so you want to share a little bit more about what are you looking for on the blog and what should they come find on that blog?
Yes, so we have a blog, and thank you for participating and being featured in
Thank you
one
for
of our articles. So our blog is focused on physician wellness, and it's a collection of interviews with people who are doing different kinds of work in the space of physician wellness and have different kinds of resources to offer. So that's something where, if you're interested in reading the articles, you can visit the blog website. If you're interested in potentially being featured in the blog, you're also welcome to reach out to me because we're really interested in anyone who's tackling physician wellness from any kind of angle. We'd love to feature you.
Well, thank you so much, Rachel, for joining me and sharing your passion. I'm very invigorated by your enthusiasm and the amount of solutions that you're creating. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been really fun.
And for all who have your questions, if you don't want to ask Rachel directly, make sure to share the questions and comments down below. We can't wait to hear from you.